Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Declan lay awake, heart pounding in his chest. The house had fallen silent hours ago, his parents' muffled voices fading into the night, but sleep eluded him, as it often did these days. Declan's gaze drifted to his closet door, slightly ajar. Beyond it, hidden behind rows of t-shirts and jeans, hung the object of his fascination, his mother's emerald green cocktail dress. The sequins caught the light, winking at him like stars. He'd first noticed it months ago, when helping his mom clean out her wardrobe. The way the fabric shimmered, how it felt so delicate between his fingers. It awakened something in him he couldn't explain. Since then, he'd snuck glances at it whenever possible, imagining how it would feel to wear it. Declan's father's booming laugh echoed in his mind.
"That's my boy,"
he'd say, clapping Declan on the back after a grueling football practice.
"Gonna make the varsity team next year, mark my words."
The praise should have made Declan beam with pride. Instead, it left him feeling hollow, like he was play-acting a role that didn't quite fit. With trembling hands, Declan pushed back the covers and padded across the room. He pressed his ear to the door, listening for any sign of movement in the house. Nothing but silence greeted him. Heart racing, he eased open the closet door and reached for the dress. The fabric was cool and smooth against his skin as he slipped it over his head. It settled around him like a cloud, the hem brushing just above his knees. Declan turned to face the full-length mirror on the back of his door. His breath caught in his throat. The person staring back at him looked right, like the fog had lifted, revealing who he was meant to be all along. He twirled experimentally, watching the skirt flare out around him. A giddy laugh bubbled up in his chest, threatening to escape. For the first time in forever, he felt truly alive. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secret late-night dress-up sessions. Declan raided his mother's closet when she was out, trying on flowing skirts, silky blouses, and glittering accessories. Each time he donned the feminine attire, he felt more like himself. During the day, he went through the motions, throwing the football with his dad, hanging out with his guy friends. But his mind constantly drifted to the hidden world waiting for him in his room. One afternoon, Declan found himself alone in the house. His parents were at a work function, not due back for hours. The perfect opportunity to explore without fear of interruption. He made his way to his parents' room, beelining for his mother's vanity. Hesitantly, he picked up a tube of lipstick, a rich, velvety red. With shaking hands, he applied it to his lips, marveling at how it accentuated their shape. Next came the eyeshadow, a shimmering gold that made his hazel eyes pop. Blush added a rosy glow to his cheeks. With each brushstroke, Declan felt himself transforming, becoming the person he'd always longed to be. He was so engrossed in his reflection that he didn't hear the front door open, didn't notice the heavy footsteps coming up the stairs.
"What the hell is this?"
Declan froze, lipstick clutched in his hand like a weapon. His father stood in the doorway, face contorted in a mixture of shock and disgust.
"Dad,
Declan's voice came out high and panicked. He scrambled to his feet, knocking over bottles of perfume in his haste. His father's eyes raked over him, taking in the makeup, the dress, the painted nails.
"What kind of freak show is this?"
he spat. Shame and fear washed over Declan in equal measure. He'd never seen his father look at him with such revulsion.
"It's not... I was just what?"
his father roared.
"Prancing around in women's clothing like some kind of pervert?"
Declan flinched at the venom in his voice.
"No, Dad, please, I can explain."
but his father was already storming out of the room.
I want all of this! This garbage out of my house! Now!
The slam of the front door punctuated his exit. Declan sank to the floor, sobs racking his body. The carefully constructed world he'd built came crashing down around him, leaving him exposed and raw. In the days that followed, a heavy silence settled over the house. Declan's father refused to look at him, barely acknowledging his presence. His mother flitted between them, trying desperately to mend the rift that had opened up in their family. "He just needs time," she'd whisper, squeezing Declan's hand. But the look in her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. Declan retreated into himself, spending most of his time locked in his room. The dresses and makeup that had once brought him such joy now felt tainted, reminders of the gulf between him and his father. One evening, a soft knock on his door roused Declan from his brooding. His mother entered, carrying a steaming mug of cocoa. "Can we talk, sweetie?" She perched on the edge of his bed, her eyes full of concern. Declan nodded, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. The rich scent of chocolate filled the air, bringing back memories of cozy winter nights and shared laughter. His mother took a deep breath. "Your father, he's struggling to understand. But I want you to know that I love you, no matter what. You're my child, and nothing will ever change that." Tears welled up in Declan's eyes. "I didn't mean to disappoint you guys," he whispered. She pulled him into a fierce hug. "Oh, honey, you could never disappoint me. I just want you to be happy, to be true to yourself." Declan buried his face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mom. I just know that when I put on those clothes, I feel right, like I'm finally seeing the real me." His mother stroked his hair, her voice thick with emotion. "Then that's who you are, sweetheart. And we'll figure this out together, okay?" For the first time in days, Declan felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, with his mom's support, he could find a way to bridge the gap between who he was expected to be and who he truly was. The next morning, Declan woke to raised voices coming from downstairs. He crept to the top of the stairs, straining to hear.
"He's our son, for Christ's sake!"
His father's voice, angry and defensive.
"Exactly. Our child. And we need to support them, no matter what."
His mother, calm but firm.
"Support? You want me to encourage this deviant behavior?"
Declan's heart clenched at the disgust in his father's tone.
"It's not deviant. It's who they are. And if you can't accept that, then maybe we need to rethink some things."
The sound of a chair scraping across the floor, then heavy footsteps. Declan scrambled back to his room just as the front door slammed shut. He spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of his normal routine. But inside, his mind was racing. The conversation he'd overheard played on repeat, each word cutting deeper. As night fell, Declan found himself standing in front of his closet once more. He reached for the green dress, his first love, the catalyst for everything that had happened. The sequins felt cool against his palm as he ran his hand over the fabric. In that moment, Declan made a decision. He couldn't keep living a lie, pretending to be someone he wasn't just to please his father. The cost was too high. With shaking hands, he slipped the dress over his head. It settled around him like a second skin, familiar and comforting. He added a touch of mascara, a swipe of lip gloss. The face staring back at him from the mirror was scared, but determined. Taking a deep breath, Declan opened his bedroom door and made his way downstairs. His parents' voices drifted from the living room, tense and clipped. He paused in the doorway, heart pounding.
"Mom?" Dad? Can we talk?
They turned to face him, expressions ranging from shock to confusion to barely concealed anger. Declan steeled himself, chin held high.
This is who I am,
he said, voice wavering but growing stronger with each word.
I'm not the son you thought you had. I'm your daughter, and I need you to see me, to accept me for who I really am.
The silence that followed was deafening. Declan's father's face turned an alarming shade of red, while his mother's eyes filled with tears.
You can't be serious,
his father finally growled.
This is just a phase, some kind of rebellion. It's not,
Declan interrupted.
I've felt this way for as long as I can remember.
I've just been too afraid to say it out loud. His mother stood, approaching slowly as if Declan were a skittish animal. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, pulling him into a hug. I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to tell us. Declan melted into her embrace, relief washing over him. But the moment was short-lived.
I won't stand for this,
his father's voice boomed.
No son of mine is going to prance around in dresses, pretending to be a girl. It's unnatural, it's wrong, and I won't have it in my house.
Declan pulled away from his mother, facing his father head-on.
I'm not pretending, Dad. This is who I am, who I've always been, even if I didn't have the words for it before.
His father's jaw clenched, a vein throbbing in his forehead.
Then you're no son of mine. I want you out of this house, now. John!
Declan's mother gasped.
You can't be serious. They're our child.
But his father was already storming up the stairs.
Pack your things,
he called over his shoulder.
I want you gone by morning.
Declan stood rooted to the spot, shock coursing through his system. He'd known his father would be angry, disappointed even. But this complete rejection? His mother wrapped an arm around his shoulders, her voice shaking. He doesn't mean it, sweetie. He's just upset. We'll talk to him, make him see reason. But Declan knew better. The look in his father's eyes had been one of pure revulsion. There would be no talking him around, no compromise to be found. In that moment, standing in the living room in his mother's dress, Declan realized he had a choice to make. He could stay and try to conform to his father's expectations, burying his true self deeper and deeper. Or he could leave, stepping into the unknown but finally free to be who he was meant to be. The decision, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. Declan squared his shoulders, meeting his mother's tearful gaze.
It's okay, Mom. I think this is for the best. I can't keep living a lie, not even for Dad's sake.
She pulled him close, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. Where will you go? What will you do?
I don't know,
Declan admitted.
But I'll figure it out. I have to.
The next few hours passed in a blur of packing and tearful goodbyes. Declan's father remained locked in his study, refusing to come out even as Declan prepared to leave. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Declan stood on the front porch, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His mother pressed a wad of cash into his hand, along with a slip of paper. It's not much, but it should help you get started, she said, voice thick with unshed tears. And that's the number for your Aunt Sarah in the city. She'll understand. I know she will. Promise me you'll call her. Declan nodded, throat too tight to speak. He pulled his mother into one last crushing hug, inhaling the scent of her perfume, trying to memorize every detail of this moment.
I love you, Mom,
he whispered.
Thank you for seeing me, the real me.
She cupped his face in her hands, eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sorrow.
You are so brave, my beautiful girl. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise.
With one last kiss on the cheek, Declan turned and walked down the driveway. He didn't look back, couldn't bear to see the anguish on his mother's face or the dark silhouette of his father watching from an upstairs window. As he reached the end of the street, Declan paused. The weight of his decision settled over him like a heavy cloak. He was leaving behind everything he'd ever known, his home, his friends, the life he'd built. But with each step forward, he felt a little lighter. The person he'd been pretending to be for so long began to fall away, revealing the truth that had always been there, just beneath the surface. Declan took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles he might face, he knew one thing for certain. He was finally, truly himself. The bus station was a hive of activity, even in the early morning hours. Declan clutched his duffel bag close, feeling small and exposed in the sea of strangers. The cash his mother had given him felt like a lifeline, but he knew it wouldn't last long. He approached the ticket counter, heart pounding. "1 ticket to the city, please," he said, voice barely above a whisper. The bored-looking clerk hardly glanced up. "That'll be $45. Declan's hands shook as he counted out the money. This was it, the point of no return. Once he got on that bus, there would be no going back to his old life. As he settled into his seat, watching the familiar streets of his hometown fade into the distance, a mixture of emotions washed over him. Fear, certainly, of the unknown, of what the future might hold. But underneath that was a current of excitement, of possibility. For the first time in his life, Declan felt truly free. The journey passed in a blur of highway miles and quiet introspection. Declan's mind raced with questions and worries. Where would he stay? How would he support himself? And most pressingly, how would he begin the process of transitioning into the person he knew himself to be? As the city skyline came into view, Declan felt a surge of determination. He may not have all the answers, but he had something even more valuable, the courage to be true to himself, no matter the cost. The bus pulled into the terminal with a hiss of brakes. Declan shouldered his bag and stepped out into the bustling city street. The noise and energy were a sharp contrast to the quiet suburb he'd left behind. He found a quiet corner and pulled out the slip of paper his mother had given him. With trembling fingers, he dialed his Aunt Sarah's number. "Hello?" A warm, familiar voice answered on the third ring. "Aunt Sarah? It's Declan. I'm in the city, and I was hoping—" His voice cracked, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up to him. "Declan! Sweetie, what's wrong? Are you okay?" The concern in her voice was his undoing. Declan found himself pouring out the whole story. His secret dressing up, his father's discovery, the ultimatum that led to his leaving home. There was a long pause when he finished. Declan held his breath, terrified that he'd alienated the one person who might be able to help him. "Oh, honey," Sarah finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry you've had to go through all that alone. Where are you now? I'm coming to get you." Relief washed over Declan in a dizzying wave. "I'm at the bus station," he managed to choke out. "Thank you, Aunt Sarah. Thank you so much." "Don't you worry about a thing," she assured him. "We'll figure this out together, okay? I'll be there in 20 minutes. As Declan waited, he felt a glimmer of hope. He may have lost his father's approval, but he wasn't alone. There were still people in his corner, willing to support him as he embarked on this new chapter of his life. When Sarah's beat-up Volkswagen pulled up to the curb, Declan felt a rush of affection for his free-spirited aunt. She'd always been the black sheep of the family, with her colorful clothes and unconventional lifestyle. Now, he realized, she might be exactly the person he needed. Sarah enveloped him in a crushing hug the moment he climbed into the car.
"Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to be yourself."
Declan melted into her embrace, the stress and fear of the past day finally catching up to him. He let out a shuddering sob, clinging to his aunt like a lifeline. Sarah held him until the tears subsided, then pulled back to look him in the eye.
"All right, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get you some food. You look like you haven't eaten in days. Then we'll head back to my place and figure out next steps. Sound good?"
Declan nodded, managing a watery smile.
"That sounds perfect. Thanks, Aunt Sarah."
As they navigated the city streets, Sarah filled the silence with chatter about her latest art projects and the antics of her rescue cats. It was comfortingly normal, a reminder that life went on even in the face of upheaval. Sarah's apartment was a cozy, cluttered space filled with half-finished canvases and eclectic knickknacks. It felt worlds away from the sterile perfection of Declan's childhood home. "Make yourself at home," Sarah said, gesturing to the overstuffed couch. "I'll put on some tea." As the kettle whistled, Sarah settled in across from Declan, her expression turning serious. "All right, kiddo, let's talk about what you need. Have you thought about your next steps? Transitioning, I mean?" Declan shook his head, overwhelmed.
I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "I just know I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not."
Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Well, there are resources available. Support groups, therapists who specialize in gender identity issues. We can look into those together. And of course, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need while you figure things out." Tears welled up in Declan's eyes once more.
"Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you."
Sarah reached out, squeezing his hand.
"That's what family is for, sweetie. The real kind of family. The ones who love you for exactly who you are."
As they talked late into the night, making plans and researching options, Declan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in his life, he was on the right path. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of appointments and new experiences. Sarah helped Declan find a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues, as well as a support group for transgender youth. At his first group meeting, Declan felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He'd never been in a room full of people who understood exactly what he was going through.
"Hi, everyone,"
he said, voice shaking slightly as he introduced himself.
"I'm Declan, or at least that's the name I've been using. I'm pretty new to all this."
The group welcomed him warmly, sharing their own stories of coming out and transitioning. Declan felt a weight lift off his shoulders as he realized he wasn't alone in his struggles. One of the group members, a girl named Jasmine, approached him after the meeting. "Hey, I just wanted to say welcome," she said with a warm smile. "I remember how overwhelming it all felt at first. If you ever want to grab coffee and chat, I'd be happy to share what I've learned." Declan felt a rush of gratitude.
"That would be great, actually. Thanks, Jasmine."
As the weeks turned into months, Declan began to settle into his new life. With Sarah's support and the guidance of his therapist, he started the process of legally changing his name and gender marker. The day he received his new ID card, now bearing the name Donna, felt like a rebirth. She stared at the small plastic rectangle, tracing her finger over the F listed under gender.
"It's really happening," she whispered,
a mixture of awe and disbelief in her voice. Sarah pulled her into a hug. "You've come so far, Dana. I'm so incredibly proud of you." Dana's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. They'd been in regular contact since she left home, though her father still refused to speak to her. "How did it go at the DMV, sweetheart?" the message read. Dana smiled, snapping a picture of her new ID to send in response. "It's official, Mom. I'm Dana now, legally and in every other way that matters." The reply came almost instantly. "Oh, my beautiful daughter. I'm so happy for you. I love you so much." Tears pricked at Dana's eyes as she read the words. She may have lost her father's approval, but the love and support of her mother and aunt meant everything.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.